Order, first call it officially to order at 12:01.
Okay,
For any public participation. Hearing none, we'll move on to the budget. Go ahead, Chief.
okay. Yeah, sorry about that, Dennis. So we're requesting an overall increase in the fire department fiscal 23 budget of $270,144. The vast majority of that increase is in personnel services, which it usually is. That totals 265,644. There's a little more than 113,000 in salary step increases. And about 2,500 of that is a raise for the secretary. And I had asked for an increase in overtime of 50,000. Just because we run behind every year, and I don't think it's fiscally responsible to not acknowledge the fact that we could use a little bit more overtime. And I'm very hopeful every year that we can maintain our 4 groups, and I can come very close to that figure. We left miscellaneous overtime alone. And just a reminder, miscellaneous overtime is used for like storm emergencies. Like if we were going to hire tomorrow a couple of extra firefighters because of the storm, it would come out of that. And stuff sort of like that. Just stuff that's not routine shift overtime. And that's level funded. There are some incidental increases because of the contract, the contractual raise that all the department members get. And that results in subsequent increases in some of the benefits. I totaled up some of them, 41,845 in holiday pay. Most of that is due to the fact that there's an extra holiday now, the Juneteenth, that was included in this year's budget. Educational incentive is down slightly. That's kind of a fluke. Usually goes up a little bit every year. We had a senior department member that left the department, and that person was being compensated for a bachelor's degree. And we have a brand new firefighter that has an associate's degree. So that's kind of like the difference between the two. And I would expect that's going to creep back up probably during the fiscal year, and then go up to an incremental increase next year. EMT stipends, that's a rather sharp increase, 65,641. That's again a contractual obligation that we have, where the stipends were raised. I didn't put it in there, but I think I put it in the budget explanation. I believe their paramedics are 10, EMTs are 9, and first responders are 8%. That sound right, Deputy? Do you think does that sound right?
Yeah, it might be 8% this year, but it's close.
Okay. Anyway, there was an increase, which accounts. Everybody in the department we have 6 paramedics, and the rest of them are EMTs, and we have currently have 2 first responders. We had a very slight increase. There's a stipend for if you have a commercial driver's license, it's a 1% of firefighter step, and that's $88. Substitution is firefighters who are acting in a supervisory role. That was level funded, and we actually eliminated the designated firefighter at 0 funded because the remaining firefighters that were grandfathered due to a previous contractual agreement have retired, so there's no need to have it anymore. So that was 0 funded. We have basically a salary step increase for EMS director / coordinator. The department split into two positions, where the director gets a stipend and the coordinator gets a stipend. So their combined increase was $1,354. I did make a 5-year prediction. I altered the overtime figure in the budget explanation, and the new 5-year average for overtime is 562,843. I believe we asked for 530,000 this year. The only other change in the budget was we increased a couple of accounts in contractual services. We have an account for mutual aid association dues. We're a part of both Metro Fire and the Essex County Chiefs Association because we're right on the county line. And Metro Fire had a pretty substantial dues increase. They haven't raised their dues in 20 years. So that came up by $2,500, and that reflects that increase. And then the only other increase was the telephones. That account also pays for our computerized incident reporting system. And that's a $2,000 increase just to cover that goes up every year, like a lot of our auxiliary services. So that covers that. Materials and supplies is level funded. I just threw an explanation in about medical supplies and uniforms because they typically tend to generate the most questions. And then sundry charges, which are by and large association dues and so forth, other than the two organizations that I mentioned already. That's level funded. I believe that's at 3,000. And that's pretty much the budget in a nutshell for this year.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I know Sean had a memo and then the chief answered the memo. So I'll start off with you, Sean, seeing you went on the record with a memo. So go ahead.
Who's Sean?
Yeah,
Brother. Oh, okay, I keep calling you brother.
that's all right. I was a little stumped by that too.
Honestly,
I do that to your father all the time.
does this mean?
Yeah, that's you.
Okay. So, no, listen, I have concerns about the contract. I don't love, but it's like, it's almost not even worth bringing up here because it's a very straightforward budget. It's like, all right, everything's contractual. It's done. We can't do anything about that now. So it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if that I'm really using your time productively to whine about something that we can't change. But in general, like I hate increasing minimum manning provisions. It's like you can increase staffing without having to increase that provision. So you have some flexibility. But like, again, that is what it is. And so otherwise it's very straightforward here. Part one's up 4.5%. I assume that's like a 3% COLA with about another 1.5 and other increases that are contractual related to steps and grades and what have you. And then there's a little bump in contractual services. Everything else is the same. So it's pretty straightforward, Chief. I appreciate that. But notwithstanding my concerns about the terms of the contract, otherwise it's pretty straightforward and it's nothing to really change here.
And I did feel an obligation to, write out a little bit about the overtime because I'm fully aware of the fact that the overtime is significantly higher than what was either budgeted or predicted. We're in the second year of this pandemic, and it's unparalleled in my career. I've never experienced anything like this. And there were a few steps that were taken, frankly, for safety purposes that had never been taken before. One of them was the increase in staffing during the COVID surges. And it just had to be done to guarantee, try to guarantee as much as possible, bringing the virus back to the station. But it's definitely unprecedented. If 3 years ago, if somebody had ever told me that I would have to raise a staffing level due to a pandemic, I would have just looked at them and said, you're crazy. So I don't have anything to compare this to.
Yeah, it's also like this pandemic will theoretically end at some point, and then it's like, so is this? I understand the temporary need for the increase. It's like, my perspective, Chief, and we don't need to go in circles about this because I'm wasting your time doing it. But my perspective on this is like, we don't need to permanently do stuff that's going to tie us up later if we realize we don't need the same staffing levels we needed for the past 2 years, And so that's just my overall perspective on it. Nothing stops you from bumping up. You were running 12 people per shift. Now you're running 13, right? Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
It's like, so in that scenario, it's like you can keep your 10-man minimum in the contract. You don't have to bump that in order to raise your shifts to 13 people. It's always been my perspective of minimum manning. It's like we're giving away. I just feel like we're giving away so much. And we're tying ourselves, in collective bargaining, that number is never going to go down now. Never, ever, ever. Like, so we increase it, it's never going to come back down.
Yep. You're right. Yep.
And so that's why it scares me. So I don't like doing it, but that's all.
Okay. I mean, COVID wasn't the only reason, but it definitely affected our overtime in the last fiscal year.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
what I brought it up. I mean, the other email I sent out, I think adequately covers at least my position on why we went from 10 to 11. And, I mean, contracts change. I agree with you that I doubt seriously that it's going to go back down to 10. But, it was vetted between the town and the union, and there's once it's settled, there's not really much I can do about that.
Yep. Understood. And you did do a good, I said this in the email, but you do a great job laying out your budget. Yeah, I really appreciate the way you do it every year. And I wish you saw that kind of effort from everybody, because you do go above and beyond to lay it out for us, and I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. Try.
Amy, do you have any questions?
I was going to ask about, I know you've got some vacancies, what are your thoughts on, or do you think you'll be able to fill those this year, or do you think you're looking beyond 2022?
Yep. Actually, we hired 5 last May, and they were hired. They started at the end of around May 19th, I believe, and we put them to work right away. We sent them to EMT school, which is like a month long, literally every day for 30-day class. Got them certified, and then shortly after that, they went to the academy. But they actually were hired back in, I want to say like February. There's a considerable lag between, they weren't paid in February, but there's a considerable lag between when we hire people and when we actually can get them to the academy, which is extremely frustrating to me, because obviously I want to stop them as soon as I can so we can get them trained and they can be used to beef up the shift strength and keep the overtime down. We had a firefighter retire in June, and for a number of reasons, I think we had a surge in the fall. We couldn't get that firefighter started. We finally got that firefighter approved, and he's scheduled for May. We just finished with the second candidate. And I don't think we have a training date back for that firefighter. We don't have one yet, right?
No, not yet.
Okay, but it's
We'll
coming.
submit.
I'm really hoping that he'll get into the May class as well, so we can start 2 in May. They would graduate sometime in late July or early August, something like that. They'll come out firefighter 1 and 2 certified, and then they'll join a shift. And we had a retirement in January and just had another retirement. And we haven't started the hiring process yet. The civil service has made some changes. They went to a yearly exam now, so I'm just waiting for a list to be certified so we can call for a list to fill those positions. So it's a combination of a couple of different things. Like everything else, COVID aggravated the schedule. For a while there, they weren't running anybody through fire academy. That caused a bigger backlog. But we're doing the best we can to fill it.
Are you running into issues with not enough people taking the civil service exam?
No,
just not
no,
have
actually, yeah, there's enough interest in the job. I know the police department has a hard time.
That's why I was asking that. I'm on that committee too.
Yeah, they go through a ton of candidates on the police side. And we can go through a fair number of candidates on our side, but we've been very fortunate in finding people who want to work without having to call for an extra list or more names or anything like that.
Chief, floor retirements, my favorite question. You just mentioned some do we have any more coming up for this coming year? I know you can't say, I don't know officially, because they don't have to tell me, but looking at the aging of the staff again, like I do every year, we got a few names on there that have potential to take advantage of the retirement if they get the years, but I don't know if it's the age, you know.
Well, the two that I thought were going to retire this year just retired. So I don't have anyone immediately in mind that's going to retire during this fiscal year. But you know, that can, Dennis, you know as well as I, that can change.
Well, that's the biggest kicker, other than COVID, for the budget, especially now with the minimum manning going up one more. So you still only have the cushion of two. You lose one,
Yep.
and you're dead. You know, so that's what I'm concerned about. That's the biggest kicker in the overtime, is losing retirement people. Long-time injury, I know you can't do anything about that. You know, that's the nature of the beast. But I'm concerned about that, especially with negotiations coming up. Is there any way to put into negotiations to go to the civilian dispatcher? Is that going to be part of the package?
That would be subject to the contract, Dennis. They have to bring it up in negotiations and collective bargaining. So the last time that was seriously considered was when the public safety building was built, and I wasn't chief then, but I'm not really sure why that didn't happen, but it didn't. I mean, it's a topic. It's always a topic for negotiation, but you know, the contract doesn't expire until June, and it would have to be vetted. It would have to be negotiated and vetted.
Well, I know it'd have to be negotiated. I just didn't know if it was going to be put into the scenario of discussion points for the town. You know, I don't know what your feelings and Tom's feelings are about going to that to alleviate one person in the minimum manning. I mean, if it's taken out of the minimum manning that the dispatcher is not counted, it's only persons on the engines, is what I'd like to call it, then we're ahead of the game. You know, that means you could have a substitute from the town hall come in and answer the phone if you had to. You know what I mean? So
Not anymore.
Yeah.
That's all changed, that game, and you know, not to speak for the chief, but definitely, Dennis, I understand. We've kicked that around over the years, but you're talking about hiring 8 to 16 dispatchers, health insurance through the town. They set up their own union. There's a lot of other things that have to go with it. The certifications have changed over the years. The days where you could bring a teacher in to do it are long gone. So there's a lot that would go with that, but I understand what you're thinking. It swaps that guy out, takes no one off the street. I do agree with that portion of it, you know, but it's a big undertaking.
well, it's no different than taking over the ambulance, giving it away again, but
Right.
that's an item for discussion also by what you, is that, you know, they are cutting back on staff and having a hard time staffing that in other departments like Woburn or Burlington, where they have their own ambulance, it may augment, you know, us in a minimum manning situation by taking on additional roles that the staff could be used multiple places for. So that's my own feeling for trying to add staff to minimize overtime elsewhere. So,
It's something we can certainly, you know, take under advisement for the next negotiation session, Dennis.
it just seems that it's nothing ever comes up other than whatever they bring up on their side. So that's all. Welcome back.
Oh, I've been here. I'm kind of working at the same time here, but one question I did want to ask you, Chief, and then this sort of stems off of Dennis's comments is, can you help me understand how like we don't run our own EMS service, right? I know we respond to medical calls.
Yeah.
But how do we pay the EMS company? Like, where is that in your budget? How does that all work? How does the money flow there?
They actually don't receive any money from the town.
Okay, so they just collect the revenue.
Right.
Because I am very curious about whether it's a good idea to explore in the coming years, whether it makes more sense given our stuff. Like, I'll say this, I think our staffing levels in the fire department are healthy, to put it mildly.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
I know we've had these conversations before, Chief, and I won't, reiterate, I don't want to be redundant. I think you know where I am on that, but like at our current staffing levels, and you know more about this than I do for sure, but shouldn't we be thinking about collecting that revenue ourselves and offsetting the budget? I know it's a big question, but
No, that's fine. And that's definitely been discussed along with the civilian dispatch has been discussed, Dennis, as well. I mean, it's like every other bargaining session. At the beginning of the session, the town has its proposals and the union has their proposals. Do I think the fire department, the ambulance service belongs in the fire department? Yes, I do. I'm not convinced that that would happen though, without additional staffing to what we have already taken place, which I'm sure is not what you were hoping for.
well, maybe I don't know, Chief. I don't like increasing staffing, but I understand there's a need.
Yeah,
for
no, I understand that.
especially if you're going to take on, an EMS operation that totally transforms the way your department runs, right? Like,
It will definitely bring more income into the department.
right.
Thing is, I need to be careful. I think I did okay with expressing the fact that we kind of need 2 engines and a ladder staffed all the time to handle the calls that we have. My concern about having an ambulance and not raising the staffing is that it's going to take a company out of service. And I mean, they'll be going in, literally going over to an ambulance and responding on the call. And then it takes them out of the game, so to speak. An average ambulance call can take 45 minutes, an hour. It depends upon where you take them.
Yeah, if you need to transport, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but we transport. I mean, a lot of them are transports.
Right.
So do I think the fire department, the ambulance belongs in the fire department? Absolutely. I'm having a hard time with given the growth, increase in responses that we're making now, thinking that we could accomplish that with what we have presently for staff.
Yeah. I'm sure you're right about it. And it's a bigger question. It's not one where,
Yeah,
it's a
okay.
long-term
There's nothing
planning.
wrong with the question. I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah. It's also not something that like, it's more like, I'm more interested in like you and your leadership team and your vision for something like this. And then we can bring it to the union. It's not something like you do in tandem with the union necessarily, but I digress. I was just curious. Thanks. That's helpful.
Chief, I know it's not part of today's discussion, but you mentioned it early in your memo. Where do we sit with capital outlay for this year, other than your generator from carryover to get put in? Is there any other ticket items that we're going to hear about from your department?
Not this year, Dennis. We have the public safety building project going on. It's going to be going full tilt for probably a majority of the next fiscal year. The other project that I would really like to see completed would be a reconstruction of the front ramp, the apparatus ramp. And I think that's going to be handled in some way during the public safety building project. We have other things that we need, but for various reasons, the age of the equipment, funding opportunities available to the federal government and so forth, I think it would be smarter to wait a year before I request them. I might be able to, in other words, I might be able to get more subsidized funding through the federal government if I, in this particular instance, if I wait a year.
Okay, that's smart. I appreciate that.
Okay.
We still have that so-called bonus package money that we're looking to allocate elsewhere too, in your FEMA reimbursement money also. for your
Yeah.
overtime. and
They
stuff like that.
typically reimburse 90%, Dennis, so it's a good deal. You know, sometimes it's smarter to wait a year.
Okay, all right. All right, then, anybody have anything else to bring forward for today's meeting? No further questions?
No, I'm good, Dennis.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion. Chief, do you have any closing statement or anything?
No, I think, I appreciate the comments about the budget. I think it's pretty transparent and, you know, where the money we're asking for is going. And I appreciate the support.
Okay. Deputy Chief, you have anything to add?
No, pretty straightforward.
Okay. Well, we'll call this meeting. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made,
Second,
motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Thanks,
So voted.
everybody.
So voted. Thank you all. Have a good lunch.